Hi everybody, this is Dom and welcome to Raising the Barber. Before we start, please subscribe and hit the button to stay up to date. In today's podcast, we're going to talk about the journey of David Hill, owner of David Hill Gallery. From a 20-year career in the music industry to curating our groundbreaking art exhibitions, David's story is one of a passion and transformation. So don't forget to like the video, stick with us, and let's go.
Yo, listen to this, it's Raising the Barber, cut dips or chop, no ribbon.
How are you today?
I'm very well.
Yeah?
Thank you, Dan.
Good to see you. How can I help you?
Well, you've perfected the usual style for me, so I'd like more of the same, please.
That's great.
You know exactly what you're doing with
Yes, I know. Let's go for that. So scissor cut all over.
it. Something like that.
Something like that. And we're going to keep it as tight as possible on the bottom here.
Thank you.
Here, about this off. Mm-hmm. And then I try the back.
Yeah. A nice, smart gallery haircut.
Perfect.
There you go.
That's the way every gallery owner has to have it. Can you imagine? No, there's only one David Hill. There's only one. How you been?
Yeah, pretty good, thank you. Pretty good. We're coming to the end of the current exhibition at my gallery on Ladbroke Grove, which is only, 2 or 3 minute walk from here. It's an exhibition of street photography. 18 different artists, some of them very well known, some of them much less established. And it's been running for a couple of months and we're just coming to the close out. It's going to close in a couple of weeks' time. So I've been working with that at the moment.
That's interesting. What's the street art like nowadays compared to before? Because you said you have like famous artists and not so famous. So I imagine there's some emerging artists and some others that have been around for longer.
Yeah, it's street photography. So by its very nature, it's a very democratic process. Anybody can take photography in the street, especially today with an iPhone or a smartphone, whatever. So we got a real mix of work in there. Some of the artists that were featured in the exhibition have had solo museum shows in America. Many photo books published. Others, we've got one, a young lady called Alicia Coker, who's only 18. She's studying photography at Westminster University at BA level. So she's the first time she's been in an exhibition. So it kind of, it's a real broad spread of people with very different sort of stages of their careers.
That's great. And how did you start? What was your have you had any interest in photography when you were a kid or just suddenly became your passion?
I got quite excited about photography when I was like 12 or 13, something like that. And then that excitement grew and I started working in a camera shop. And I grew up in a place called Chandlersford, which is kind of halfway between Southampton and Winchester on the south coast. So I was working in there through the summer holidays from the age of, probably 14 or something like that, Saturdays, that kind of thing. And I finished school and went to sixth form college to study A-levels. And partway through that, after the first year, I left the college and I went to study photography, 3 years. So this was at Berkshire College of Art and Design in Reading. So I would travel up there. It was about an hour's travel. And I loved it. And I was still continuing to work at the camera shop. So I had very good technical knowledge because you need that just to be able to talk to people about lenses and camera bodies and light and what have you. So from a very young age, I just understood that stuff, And then I switched jobs, still with a place selling cameras, and it was a by appointment sort of studio, I suppose. And they would sell rare, professional, collectible cameras as well. So maybe some cameras from the 1930s, 1940s, 1950s, this kind of thing. But also professional, what we would call large format cameras. So the sort of things that people use for studio photography, for advertising, which are on monorails with bellows between. They take very large negatives because the quality is so high. So it was a real spread from professional to collectible, all this kind of thing. And this particular company decided to open a branch in London. And I was 18 at this point. And they said, look, would you like to go up, move to London? You've got a job if you want to go. So, of course, I'd been reading about, nightlife in London and everything, and was very intrigued by all of this. So I took the offer of the job and moved up to London.
This was how long ago?
This was April '89. I started working in London. I moved up, I think it was June or July, something like that. So a while ago now. And yeah, I loved it. I mean, coming into London at that age, it was also, well, as I say, it was 1st of April was the first day I worked in London. And that year, not like this year, which has been very, very slow, but spring broke on that day. So it was like I'd come up to London, the weather changed, everything was good. There was this whole sort of romantic, bright new beginning to it,
Best choice ever.
Yeah,
thinking.
So that was all pretty good. And I was 18 at that point.
So how long have you been commuting then? Like you moved to London, you said, but you were living in London, you were working in London, you said.
Well, I started working in London in April. Now I moved to London about 3 months later, something like that.
So you had to commute all the way?
Yeah, I was commuting daily before that. Yeah.
Mamma mia. How was the London that you were living back then?
It was an exciting time in London. I mean, the place I was working was in Fulham. I was living in Clapham, but you got to remember, this is '89. The whole acid house thing really blew up in terms of nightclubbing. '88, so it was still very, very young at this point. There wasn't lots of newspaper coverage yet, which happened not long after that, but it was still very much an underground phenomenon. So there was incredible energy, nightlife, clothing, music. A vibe in London at that time. I mean, it was really, really special.
Talking about you started in London in a photography shop, in a gallery, in a photography gallery. When did you do this for longer? You kept doing this, or you switched to? Were you tired of that? Have you abandoned that?
No, the company I was working for, it closed down. Then they were waiting to restart. I sort of stepped out, and friends of mine who I knew from nightlife in London invited me to go into the recording studio, and this was 1994. And that ended up being the first record by a band that we called Ballistic Brothers.
Okay.
And then we recorded an album after that, and another album. And this was kind of, I suppose, 94 to 97, that kind of time. And in late 94, I spoke to somebody else and we decided to start a record label, which is what we did. And that record label was called Euphonic. And it kind of officially started in 95. That was when the first record was released.
So you had a band, you had a group?
Well, the group was kind of going on. It wasn't really a performing group, it was a studio production group, really.
Okay.
But I decided that I couldn't do both things. I couldn't run the record label and I couldn't do the band. So I decided to step out of the band and focus on the record label. And I ran that for the next 9, almost 10 years, something like that. And we had lots of records released, some moderate success with that. And it was great. I enjoyed it. I mean, looking back now, there were things I would have done differently, but it was good, and I'm still in contact with most of the people I worked with. I mean, a lot of the people whose music we released were friends of mine, and I'm still in touch with these people. And I have very good relations with them.
Somehow you share something like in common still.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Then, I mean, like you had the record label for 9 years, right? And as we know, you have a gallery now. How have you transitioned in a smooth way from a business to the other? Have you had any bad moments that made you decide to like just cut every bridge from music or something?
Well, after the record label, or pretty much when it was closing, I was involved with a bar in Shoreditch called Bridge and Tunnel, which had all sorts of problems, and it closed down. I stepped away from music at that time. in terms of producing music for a general release. And I started working on music production for TV, for commercial. And I was doing music consultancy for brands as well. And I did that for a while, and it was good at that time. It's much harder today to do that. There's many more people in it, the budgets have come down. It's a different thing to what it was back then. But during that time, I happened to be on a Eurostar to Paris to DJ over there. I mean, off the back of the record label, I was DJing all over the world, really. I mean, I say all over the world, throughout Europe and Scandinavia mostly, but further afield as well. So, I was still doing that quite a bit after the record label. And one of these trips was one to DJ in Paris on a boat called the Bateau. And I was there with a guy called DJ Harvey, and we were both on the same train. And DJ Harvey was reading a book, which I'd not seen before. And this book was called Night Dancing. And it was a guide to New York nightlife. And it was published in 1980, so the timing was not good. This was when the disco backlash was going on in New York, which I'll get to in a minute. And I saw this book, and as I say, it was a guide, so it had text and also photographs. And it was listing different nightclubs in New York through the late disco period, really. So 78, 79. And they were broken into sections. It could be Latino, it could be gay, it could be uptown. And it would list the door policy, the price of drinks, the music type, who the DJ was, what the crowd was like. So it was almost like a kind of time-out guide, but in book form. In fact, the person who took the photographs and the person who did the text, they both worked for Village Voice in New York.
Here we go.
But the reproduction quality was terrible for this book. The images I could see were great, but you couldn't really see them properly. So this was 2003, and I decided to get in touch with the photographer, which I did. And I asked him if he still had his negatives and if he had many more shots, and he had everything filed. Following this particular project, he'd become Paul McCartney's tour photographer, I should say. So he was touring with Paul McCartney, very organized guy, a guy called Bill Bernstein. And Bill and I then set about trying to put a book together for this work, which I thought should be seen. I thought it was important. This took a long time. We had publishers lined up. Someone was going to do it. They did a book layout. It was all ready. Then they folded. I had to find another publisher. And then finally, from first contacting Bill in 2003, the book was ready to be published by Real Art Press in 2015.
Wow.
So it's a 12-year journey to get this book out. And when the book was set for publication, I thought we should really try to do an exhibition to tie in with this book. The photographs are great, no one's really seen them. So I started talking to people. Somerset House, the exhibition space, down by the Thames, off the Strand, they were interested to do something, but they had rebuilding plans, they couldn't do it. I spoke to a few different people, and there's a gallery on Ladbroke Grove called Serena Morton.
Okay.
And I spoke to Serena, she loved the work. She's not a photography gallery, it was fine art, but she loved it. We were talking, and she wanted to put the show on. So one thing led to another. I noticed that there was a gallery space next door to Serena's, which was vacant. So I decided to take a short-term lease on this.
Which is the one that you have now,
This
basically.
is the gallery I'm in now.
No way.
And that's how it all started. Bill's wasn't the first exhibition we did there, it was the third, but that was what led me to open the space. So the first exhibition there was a guy called Billy Name. Billy lived at the factory with Andy Warhol, and he documented the entire existence there from like 64 to 71, something like that. And he lived there, so he knew everybody. There was no access problem. I mean, he was in the mix. That was the first exhibition we put together. We worked with Billy at the time. Second exhibition was a guy called Bert Glynn, Magnum photographer, Magnum Photos, the agency. He documented the first day of the Cuban Revolution. He was over there. That was incredible. These are all unseen colour photographs. The black and white, some are seen, some weren't. That was our second show. The third one was Bill's disco work. And that was how the gallery got going.
So basically, you in a way you didn't abandon the music because you kept following the music and all the trends, and with it also like the artistic part, which was like photography, the illustrations, and then the book. So you slowly have changed your direction to something more like, I would say, pretty much like music. Is if you think about music, is something like it's endless. It has no time. Also, photography has no time. If you think about that, you waited 12 years. 12 years are a lot of years.
It's a long time.
12 days. You know what I mean?
But also all through that period of running the record label and being involved with music on a day-to-day basis prior to the gallery, I'd still been buying photo books. I'd still been going to photo exhibitions. My interest had remained. So it's not like I put it down and picked it up again.
Yeah.
So
you were able to have both passions running together.
And the funny thing is, having first shown Bill's work in 2015, it was actually a much, much better time to show it, because some of the clubs that Bill documented in New York, like G.G. Barnum's, it was a very progressive club. I mean, it was a club primarily for trans New Yorkers in the 70s. So if we'd have done that in, say, 2003, it was a very different climate to 2015. And Bill has now become an ambassador for inclusion, for acceptance, and he travels all around the world giving talks because he was one of the few people who lived through that whole time, who documented it, who was there in those clubs. Because you've got to remember, through the early 80s, so many people who lived in those nightclubs, they died of AIDS. I mean, so many of them. I mean, that whole community was just decimated. Whereas Bill, straight guy, and didn't, but had a long-term partner from the 70s, survived it and was there. And it's a first-hand record. You're talking to somebody who was there at the time, and he can talk about it. And that's what he's been doing. He's been giving talks in, around the States, but also Barcelona recently. He's done them in London. We did an event here with Defected Records like 2 or 3 years ago, where there was a series of events. He was interviewed by Colleen Murphy. It's up on YouTube. It's about an hour-long conversation. And he tells about his time and the scene and how it's all changed. Had that, book and exhibition actually happened in 2003, it would have been received, it would have been well received, but it was a very different stage for LGBTQ, and trans evolution, if you will, within society and acceptance of it,
Also, people probably were trying still to forget. 2003 is still very close to what happened, and after years and years, probably there's I would stress like just a bit of nostalgia about the 80s, and also more awareness of what different genders and inclusion is.
Yeah.
So I guess was the best time. So I'm happy you were still sticking with it.
As it works out, the delay, which was frustrating at the time because we both wanted to get the book out, we were trying, but as it happened, it was the best thing that could have happened for it. The delay was actually very, very helpful. And the other thing that meant was not only with public perception, but also media were much more receptive to it. I mean, things like The Guardian would have always run the pictures, but a much broader selection of mainstream media were receptive to images that touched upon those kind of subjects, which 15 years before they probably wouldn't have been,
Absolutely, yes. How is now the perception about the LGBTQ plus community in your idea in London, especially? Do you see that, do you see they still need to campaign, they still need to stress the idea of inclusivity, or nowadays you feel like it's everything all right? Because, when I moved to London, I was like, this is the place I want to be because nobody's judging anybody, but probably more than me.
I think it's come a long way, but there was a lot of rebalancing to do. In the same way that in terms of racism in London, yes, it's much better than it was in the 70s, but it's not to say it's right. There's still some road to travel. So I think we've got to keep doing that, and if it means positive discrimination to rebalance it so it balances long term, that's fine by me,
I agree with you, absolutely. I'm always for the protest, for the human beings' rights. People sometimes forget about that.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's been a long journey from let's say from the idea of the book to the publish. So through all this time, you were still doing your job, still working on a label, and then you suddenly slowly decided to go more and more into photography, which was one of your first passions.
That's right. I mean, the label stopped in 2003. I closed it down then. And as I say, between opening the gallery and closing the label, I was producing some events, but also music for brands. I did music for Disney's computer games, things like this,
yeah?
Various different things. So it was that was the kind of bridge between the two.
How difficult was it? They say it was easier, right, back then, working for TV and film. But how still difficult was it?
Well, the main difference was back in those days, you would have a direct communication with the producers, with the creatives, and you could get a much better understanding of things. What tended to happen just when I got out of the business, because it had changed so much, is that instead of being briefed in person, you would get an email brief, the budgets had come down. It was a very different thing. So you may have had, instead of it being maybe 3 people pitching for the job, it may have been 40 people pitching for the job, which means your work isn't getting the same attention it might have received before, but it still might take you 3 weeks to put it together. So so your chances of getting it were reduced, getting the job, but it was still taking you the same amount, and also the budgets had come down, so even if you got it, you weren't getting paid what you would have been paid before, and it was a fraction of it. So the whole thing had kind of moved around a bit,
When was the time where you felt like, I want to give people something new, something different, something that probably has been there forever, but nobody knew about it?
Well, I always try to, with the exhibitions, it took me a while to figure this out, but I have a certain criteria that I apply. And I was kind of doing it, but I didn't realize quite what I was doing. And that criteria is, obviously, it's got to appeal to me on an aesthetic level. I've got to love the work, the images. I've got to think I can sell it to my collector base. But touching on what you were just saying, it's got to have an interesting story, but also have a percentage that is previously unseen. I like coming with fresh work rather than just coming with a well-known photographer's greatest hits. That doesn't excite me too much. I like discovering things and bringing them to the fore and giving them a platform and getting the work out there and shouting about it. That's the exciting thing for me. Coming with previously unseen archives, going through, editing that, making the selection, working with the artist and presenting this work,
We were talking in once about a photographer that you like, is an Italian photographer, right?
Mario Carnicelli.
Mario, yeah. Mario Carnicelli. What's the thing that made you fall in love with his photography?
He's got the most wonderful eye. So Mario lives in Pistoia, so in Tuscany. And he was a journalist. So through the early 1960s, he was very left-leaning in his politics, and he documented the trade union movement in Italy, which was very powerful at the time. And in 1964, the trade union leader Togliatti passed away.
Togliatti, okay.
And there was a big national outpouring of grief in Italy, particularly amongst the working classes. Mario documented this, and his images were published, and he became quite well known for them. And he continued to work in journalism for a while. And in 1966, he entered a national competition in Italy he came first in this competition, and the prize was an all expenses paid trip to America to photograph whatever you want. Now, obviously, US travel from mainland Europe in the 60s was a much bigger deal than it is today. Not that many people did it, comparatively. So Mario went over then in 1966, traveled around the States, New York, Washington, Buffalo, Dallas, Chicago, all over. And his only brief was photograph whatever you want. So that's what he did. And he went back to Italy, and there was a small exhibition in Rome in 1966 because the competition was sponsored by an Italian film brand called Ferrania and also some camera manufacturers. And then Mario went again in 67 and again in 69. And then in the early 70s, he stopped taking photographs and he just worked for the family business, which was a small chain of camera stores. So he was running the family business. Fast forward to something like 2012, Mario gets to the point of retirement. A teacher from the local art college, photography teacher, was helping him pack up his things from the camera shop and discovered all these negatives.
No way.
One thing led to another. The negatives, well, some of the images were presented to me. I jumped on a plane, visited Mario, went through every single shot he took in America, and we put, working with a publisher called Real Art Press, we put a book together, and that book was published in 2017, and that was when we first did the debut exhibition of Mario's work.
After how many years, like from the 60s to, mamma mia.
Yeah, pretty much 50, yeah.
Mamma mia. 50 years there, nobody thought about it.
Just forgotten about it, yeah.
Wow, unbelievable.
So, and Mario had going back to your question, what I like about it, Mario had a very particular eye, or has a particular eye. His main influence was not really that many other photographers. He liked Robert Frank, there were a few other photographers he liked, but his main thing was New Wave cinema, Italian, French, American. And when you look at his images, you see this coming through. His compositional ability, what interests him visually is quite incredible. And the shots have proved incredibly popular. He then went on and won an award in France in 2022, Lifetime Achievement Award, Vivian Esder's prize. And there's a new book just published of his work. And Mario's late 80s now, and in very fine health and enjoying the recognition.
The question about this artist is what do you think? What do you think the photographer does to the community? What's the help that gives the community? Let me put it this way: if you see a photo of Mario Garnicelli, you think about like new cinema wave, right? Does the photographer help the whole, let's say, historic moment to be recognized, or is the way the photographer makes the photo makes people love about that moment?
Well, I would say his American work is much less community-based because, you know, he was visiting this. He wasn't within his own community. His earlier work with the Italian trade unions was much more community work, and it's an incredible body of work. When he won the award, the Vivian Esder's Award in 2022, Paris Match magazine, they ran 8 pages of these trade union images.
Mamma mia.
Yeah, fantastic.
Okay, so he made it history.
So that's more, you know, I think you've got to be within your community to really be able to tell that story authentically. I mean, yes, people go in and they document other communities and this kind of thing, and certain people spend a long time and they build bonds with them, and you can do that authentically for sure. But this was Mario within people he knew very, very well, you know.
Unbelievable.
Yeah,
it's unbelievable. And what's the shot that you like the most, if you have it?
A Mario shot?
Yeah.
Well, there's one on your wall somewhere, which I think it might have moved. It was over there, and it's called a Chicago Barbershop.
Chicago Barbershop.
Yeah, which you've got around here somewhere. Cause I gave you a small print of it.
Was it this one?
It is indeed, yeah.
Yeah.
The lighting, the composition, it transports you to that particular era as well, you know. And also the film of that particular time, because of course this was 1960s before digital photography came along. Film of that period had a very specific color palette, you know, the way the colors render. And it just feels, it's very, very period. It's beautiful.
Chicago. Have you ever been to Chicago?
No, I've never been to Chicago.
Me neither.
I would like to, because there's some fantastic music that's come from Chicago.
Is it?
Yeah. Big music city.
So this Mario, let's say you discovered an artist that was already there, but in a way, you helped him to express his photography after 50 years.
Quite a lot of the artists we work with have unseen archives. And that's one thing without really trying to, that's one of the things that I was attracted to, and that's what we've kind of become known for, showing lots of previously unseen archives and discovered work that's been languishing in, cardboard boxes or files or whatever, for decades, yeah. Yeah,
but the thing is, you said you have different artists from different, let's say, backgrounds. You say that can have the lady who just got like a BA graduation and stuff like that. What's the way you really you feel like, okay, how can you tell the story of a person? You do like your deep researches on a person, you like meet the person. It's all about those the vibe around.
It's important.
Energy.
I mean, you obviously got to know that you can work with somebody. If things don't gel initially, before you even started working, and this could be a several years relationship, life's too short. You move on. But I mean, obviously, the first thing is I've got to be in love with the images, and then I've got to think other people will love them too, and will want to be able to, love them enough to buy them. As prints. This is obviously crucial.
Obviously important, but
we're a commercial gallery, and we need to satisfy that commercial.
That's what I'm saying. Like your eye. I mean, like if I go, I've been to your gallery. I've seen photos. I understand. I see like the beauty of them, but how can I state I'm a normal person? Yeah, I'm not a collectionist. I'm nothing. I'm just a guy who likes the photo. How can I trust you in buying this photo? You know what I mean?
When you say trust, what do you mean?
I mean, like, okay, I buy it. Is it an investment? Do I like it? Where do you well, you know what I mean? What's the way I could feel safe?
I mean, you've got to trust your own judgment on this, but ultimately, buying anything artwork-wise for investment is always a risk. What I would say is that we try to work with artists because they're kind of unseen archives often. They're at the beginning of their art world career, for want of a better expression. And we get behind them in such a way that we do generate interest and recognition, and hopefully it's an upward curve from there, I mean, there's a photographer that we work with called Stanley Sori, who's from Burkina Faso in West Africa. So Burkina Faso is a landlocked country, and it borders Mali, Ghana, Benin, 6 countries it borders, Niger. And I saw his images in 2016, and I contacted a person who put a particular compilation record together that used some of these images. Again, it was a music connection. And he put together this box set, and it was called Bobo Yeye, and it's from an American label called Numero. And it was the music of Burkina Faso through the 60s and 70s. Bobo being Bobo Dioulasso, which is where it's the old city, or the old cultural city where he lives. And Yeye meaning hipster. So Bobo, place he lives, hipster, Yeye. And that was the name of the compilation. And in the booklet and the book that came with the vinyl version, there were some of these images, and I saw them and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I'd been a long-term fan of the work of people like Malik Sidibe and Seydou Keita, which is, they're Malian, so next door effectively. And so I contacted the person who put the album together. And by the end of that day, we were representing the artist, and we put together the first exhibition of this work.
Wow.
Now he's got gallery representation in Paris, Amsterdam, New York. It's been shown throughout France, in Geneva, in Norway. He's the first African photographer to receive a solo American museum show, which was the Art Institute of Chicago in 2019. So people who came in and bought a Stanley Soare print from me on that first show would not have known all these things were going to happen. They got behind it, they fell in love with the images, and everybody else fell in love with them. And it just went, and it continues to go. We've got some of his shots in the Africa Fashion Exhibition, which was at the Victoria and Albert Museum, and then went on to the Brooklyn Museum. Then it's currently in Victoria in Australia, and that's got some of his work in as well. So it's, you know, he's getting out there. He's the work's traveling the world and being seen all the time.
Unbelievable. Do you take photos?
Not very many these days. I mean, I qualified as a photographer. If I travel, I take a camera, but I don't really go out on sort of personal photographic assignments these days.
No, yeah? You're too busy.
Something like that.
And then you make music. You still make music.
Yeah.
You were DJing. Where you been recently?
I was in Stockholm recently, DJing over there about a week or so ago. But yeah, I still DJ, not very often, a couple of times a month, not like I used to, not as young as I was. But yeah, we produce as well. I produce with a guy called Nick Manasseh, and we have a reggae-based music production band, studio band
What's it called?
Soul Revivers.
Soul Revive.
Yeah, so we had an album out called On the Grove in 2022.
Check it out. It's so good.
And we had a dub version that came a few months afterwards, and we're working on a second album at the moment. So, yeah, keeping busy with all that. And it's nice also approaching it. I mean, obviously we want it to be as successful as it can be, but I'm not pinning career hopes on it, which I might have done in my 20s, you know. So it's nice to be going in and doing it and enjoying it, you know.
That's it, yes. It's a great hobby.
Well. Yeah, but it's selling well, and it's
a great hobby to have because it works well. I listen to the music, I like it a lot, honestly. Last question is a game, and I've been doing with some of them. What if you were not choosing to start a proper career in photography, you would keep doing music? What if this was continuing to be? What was your life like? What would it have been?
So hard to say, man. I mean,
just picture yourself in that moment. If you're like, okay, yeah, I want to keep doing music. I want to literally, I don't care how much they're going to pay me for that. If, you know, everything, just try to imagine what was going to happen later.
I mean, music industry is a hard industry. You know, it's tough. And I don't know. I don't know. I still want to be in it in that way. I think it takes a lot out of you. It was a lot of fun through the 90s. I think it's a much tougher business these days. So even if I wasn't in the gallery, I'm not sure I'd still be in music, to be perfectly honest with you. I mean, I like my relationship with music right now, whereas I'm treating it as a slightly glorified hobby project, really. You know, I'm still obsessed. You know, record collector, thinking about music all the time like that. But to be working on a daily basis, so much has changed, you know, and also just the way that music's consumed has changed. And of course, you know, one could understand that, one could learn that, and I understand it a bit, but it's a very different model to the one that I was working with at the time. You know, things like, I mean, Napster had just about happened then, but most of the music platforms, things, there was no Spotify then, anything like this, you know, no Deezer, no iTunes. None of that was there then. It was a very different physically based model, really. Not that that's something to scare one off, but everything's changed. And I don't know, I'm quite happy to have had my period through the 90s and early 2000s. And I don't know I'd want to be in it today in that way. So
that's a good answer. I'm satisfied.
Okay.
So now we're going to style your hair, obviously. I'm going to be using a matte wax Map Made. Yeah. It's very good for your hair because basically it's water based. It's not too strong, so it gives your hair a nice and natural look. Yeah. Keep the part in. Voila. So for how long the gallery, these exhibitions is gonna last?
The current exhibition is going to run till the 22nd of June.
All right.
And then we'll move to the next one and go from there.
That's nice.
We do about maybe 3 or 4 shows a year, something like that, depending on the size of the shows. So.
Perfetto. Where's your glasses? Where's your glasses? Let me take your glasses. Prego, dottore.
There we go.
Have a look. What do you think, sir?
You mastered it, haven't you? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for being with me. Appreciate it.
Pleasure to talk to you. Pleasure to talk to you.
And I'll see you soon. Yeah.
All right.
Always
You
keep
take
on
care.
worrying because you are your future.